Others who have come around the corner from the neighborhoods right around Northeastern. We began this series of open classrooms last semester, last spring, when Paul Grogan, who's president of the Boston Foundation, and I taught a course called The 21st Century City. We didn't advertise it very much, but we would still get 40 or 50 people coming every week to a class that explored what's happening to urban America. It was such an exciting experience for those of us who taught it, as well as apparently for many people who came as students, either registered or not, that we decided, working with the president's office here at the university, to have an open classroom every semester. One graduate seminar. This is actually a graduate seminar, a little different format than the normal ones we have with 6 to 8 students. But we do actually have graduate students in this class. We're taking this for credit. They're the ones who are going to be taking notes. They're the ones who are going to be doing all the readings. They're the ones who are going to be writing papers. And it was so exciting that we decided we would do this every semester. As you know, this semester we're devoting to a topic of great interest to many people: policy advice to the next president. We will in fact have a class that will extend through December 10th, and so we will make it right through the November 4th election. And indeed, one of the most exciting nights, I think, of many this semester will be November 5th, the evening right after the election, when we'll take a look at what happened yesterday. But all during this semester, we're going to be looking at the critical issues that the next president will have to deal with, from questions of energy to national security, foreign policy and healthcare, employment, paying our bills, all the issues that really are tremendous challenges that we face today. I might add that next semester we'll have a sequel to this. And two of us will be teaching a course called Economic Growth and Social Justice. The two faculty teaching that are Professor Kathy Minahan, who is with us today, and Professor Barry Bluestone. That's me. And we will continue to do this every semester, so stay tuned. The ground rules of this are that each week we will have 1 or 2, sometimes 3 major presenters. You will know many of these people because they're experts in their field. We'll have a chance for each of them to make a presentation, informal, formal presentation, and then we'll also have a little break so that people can stretch their legs. And then afterwards, we'll also have what we hope will be often an extensive question and answer period. I was thrilled last semester when one of the people who attended every week, an older gentleman, came up to me and said, "Have you ever heard of something called a Parisian salon?" And I said I actually had. He said, "I think this might be one of them." The idea of having a free and open discussion of critical issues and to really probe those issues in an exciting and provocative way. What we're going to be doing, therefore, is each week we will be sending out to you an invitation to come to next week's class. We'll give you a little information. Once in a while there'll be readings. Once in a while there'll be PowerPoint slides that you can download. That's why we had you register, quote unquote, for this class, so that we can send materials to you either in advance of class or directly after class, so you might be able to follow up and do that reading. We invite you to come back as often as you can. We invite you to bring your friends. This is Northeastern's, one of Northeastern's many contributions to open dialogue and discussion, and I hope you'll find it enjoyable. Before I introduce the 2 instructors of the semester to you, though, I want to introduce Chris Basso, the Associate Dean of the New School, who will give you a little bit more information.
Thank you, Barry. Again, let me offer my welcome as well to Northeastern, to the School of Social Science, Urban Affairs, and Public Policy. I'm the guy who give you the housekeeping details. That's what Associate Deans do. We know our role. There will be a few students in here. Any of the students who have registered for the class here yet today? It's oftentimes students. Karen, you're here. Okay. See me at the end of class, and we'll talk about some of the stuff that students are going to do. What the students are going to be doing, actually, And there will probably be 6 to 10 students taking the class, graduates, and maybe a couple of select undergraduates allowed in. They'll actually be writing papers each week based on reflection pieces on each week's discussions, reporting on what's going on, and then also a major semester-length policy analysis that relates to the theme of the course, Policy Advice Next President, that we will then post on our website, duly edited afterward at the end of the term. So that's what the students will be doing, and we will expect the students, of course, to be participating in the course throughout the term. And I'll hold some separate discussions with them as we move on. Now for some housekeeping details. Food and drink. You're welcome to bring your drink and food, not too crumbly, we hope. And then please, on the way out, however, make sure you take your trash, you put in the trash can on the way out. We try to keep the rooms clean. And this is a very nice room, and we hope to keep it that way so we don't keep the university happy. Cell phones and other electronic devices, obviously. I don't know about you, my coverage here sucks. So, but anyway, turn your cell phones and other electronic devices to off or vibrate, just so we don't upset the narrative. Restrooms, another popular thing. Restrooms located when you came in right here, back that way, or on the first floor there are restrooms, so when you have to break, you don't all go to the same ones. So there's restrooms on the entrance floor here when you came in, and then on the first floor when you entered from the ground. So there are restrooms in both areas. Parking. How many have questions about parking still? Okay, parking. Parking is available for a fee on the Columbus Avenue garage. That's the Renaissance Park garage on Columbus Avenue. It's an easy walk from there through the Ruggles Street Station to get over here. So that's where, in fact, most of you would do your parking. And I think that's about, oh, and also if you have not registered when you walk in the door, please do so at the break or on your way out, just so we can keep in contact with you throughout the term. I think that's all I have to say right now. Gary?
Thank you, Chris. One thing, is there any official press in the room? We are going to keep this off the record, and the reason for that is we want to be able to have the most open conversation, not only by our presenters, some of whom hold political position, but also for you, to give you an opportunity to be as free and open about your conversation without having to worry about the press. We certainly hope press will be here, and if they want to interview individuals, that is certainly their priority. They have the ability to do that either before or after the class. So let's begin. We have two marvelous professors to lead this class, one of whom has a long history with Northeastern University as an administrator, and the other as a long history as a professor. We have with us Culver, who currently is the CEO of Mass Development, the, I think, largest quasi-public development agency in the state. Bob also served as vice president of Northeastern University. He was vice president of Yale University. He was executive vice president, I think, of the Cabot Corporation.
And a partner at Coopers and Lybrand.
A partner at Coopers and Lybrand. And on top of everything else is an expert in China. Our second presenter, our second professor, is, of course, Governor Michael Dukakis. He's been at Northeastern for 16 years now, 17 years, and has been a member of our political science department, of course, governor of the state of Massachusetts, and presidential candidate in 1988, 20 years ago. They are going to coordinate this session, this set of seminars. Each of them will be here to introduce our guests. But this evening, we're going to have an opportunity to hear from each of them in terms of their kind of broad overview of the great issues they think that the nation and the globe faces, beginning with Culver and then followed with Michael Dukakis. Thank you very much. Enjoy. Begin putting together questions because we're going to have a lively Parisian salon for the rest of the semester.
Let the record show that the governor also was instrumental in me ever even being interested in public service and my going to work for him as the assistant to the director of operations of the MBTA in 1977 or 78 or 79, as opposed to going to Washington, for which I am very thankful for I had the opportunity. What I thought that we would start this round of courses with is some data. And I think that it's important, and bear with me because you're getting used to me and I'm getting used to standing. I mean, this is this all-powerful position down here. It's amazing. What I thought that we would do, just as a basis for getting into what the governor will have to talk about and what other speakers will talk about, is give some baseline data, which in fact we'll put up on the website for those of you that are interested in it and the students that may want to access it, that talks a little bit about what happened from the Clinton years through the Bush years, so that acting as if we were coming in and we were advising the new president, this would be data that would be important, it seems to me, to understand from whence we have come, and therefore what we have to deal with, at least from a data perspective, what the data tells us in the world of the next 4 years, from a government spending perspective, a consumer spending perspective, and sort of in terms of key indicators that talk about what the domestic and international scene look like. First off, what I'm going to do is go through 4 slides that are going to talk about Clinton's first term and what the government spending in 1994 looked like in the second year of the first term. And you can see, just to get into this and to try to keep it as simple as possible, and I don't know how to point and do this at the same time. If I touch this, it doesn't show up there, right? But you can see the critical things to look at. Clearly, our defense spending was 20% of the budget in those days. Non-defense was 18%, and a big number, which you'll see start to fluctuate, was interest at 14%, and then mandatory expenditures were 48% of the budget 2 years into the Clinton administration. By the time we reach 1998, you can see the changes that have occurred in terms of mandatory spending. You can see the decrease that's occurred in terms of defense spending. You can see interest basically staying as it was, or you'll see it decline. Bob Rubin was taking hold. This kind of demonstrates for our new president coming into office that, in fact, at least in one administration, you saw people beginning to pay off the debt, pay down the budget, decrease expenditures on the military side and on the interest side, and increase the mandatory side. Bush comes along, and immediately, if you look at these two, you go from 52% was in the mandatory area, 56%, and 8% is in interest. Now, that looks very good, and the defense budget is down even more at 17%. See, 18 to 17%. Now, that's the tail that Bush inherited from the Clinton administration, right? And you'll see that in subsequent slides, that in fact the debt was being paid off, interest expense was going down, and the defense budget was in fact going down as a result of what had happened in the Clinton administration. Then you look at the 2006 budget, and you see mandatory is 55%, it was 56, down to 55. You see that interest expense has gone up to 9%. And you see that the defense budget is beginning to move up, and you see that non-defense expenditures are moving down. I believe I then have the summary sheet here, which sort of shows you, if I can come out here, the important stuff to look at is the growth that then occurred. Here we are in gross domestic product, which is what the Bush administration talks a lot about being important to growth. But look at what happened. In '94, we had a $7.8 trillion gross domestic product. Tax receipts on that were $1.4 billion, okay? And total government outlays were $1.6 trillion. By '98, we were at $9.1 trillion in gross domestic product, with tax receipts of $1.8. That is a substantial increase in tax receipts from someone from that administration, with total government outlays of $1.7 trillion, outlays of $1.7 billion. The point here being what?
we had tax receipts of 1.8 and we spent 1.7. In all other cases, we had tax receipts 1.8, we spent 1.9, 2.0, we spent 2.2. It was only after Clinton, one could argue, had gotten discipline in place, sort of the first time you have ever seen this kind of discipline, that we were spending less under a Democratic administration than in fact we had in tax receipts. We were developing a surplus, which you'll see in subsequent graphs. This GDP growth, 94 to 98, 16.7%. GDP growth, 2002 to 2006, 13%. Note once again, the economy was growing. Some would say the bubble, but it was growing much faster, and more taxes were being collected under the Clinton administration than under the Bush administration. Similarly, there's a tax receipt growth. And here's what we now have: total government outlay 6.3% versus 15.8%. And I don't believe the 15.8% that we were able to collect really shows the full effect of the war. Consumer spending, just to show some of this, because I think it's of interest to probably everybody here, just to see how we have been spending money. This thing to keep an eye on is what happens with the food number, what happens to the transport number, and insurance and pensions. You'll see basically, you can watch this move, and then I think we have a summary slide at the end. Food now is going down in the Bush administration. Transport, watch the difference staying the same, but the insurance number is going up over time. Okay. Food down. Food stays at that place with transportation down. The movement here and the issue that we need to look at is that these are big numbers. And so the argument could be made that there's not a lot of movement, but as you look, housing basically going up from 94 to 06 in terms of what people are spending their money on. Remember, 1% in this is a very large number. Apparel, the expenditure going down. Okay, so people are spending less money on themselves, more money on their houses. Transport, less money is being spent on transportation. Healthcare, more money is being spent, and not clear. You could say it's steady, but it feels like more money is being spent. Entertainment. And then the other category, which contains just a lot of normal disposable things that people are buying, is going up. So there is more, it would appear that there's more cash in the system. People have more disposable income, and we've all read about this. But in fact, the money is being spent basically on housing as we move forward as a premonition, if you will, for the bubble that's going to burst. Real GDP growth, you can see here that as you get to the 01 time, that's the 9/11 period, but this shows very clearly the bubble that in fact existed, or the growth that existed during the Clinton administration. And even in the better times of the Bush administration, there has been no growth that has equaled the growth that was happening during the Clinton administration. Also, I tacked unemployment rates there, and you can see that during the Clinton years, you had a almost consistent decline in unemployment, and then growth that came along in unemployment during the Bush administration, with it beginning to come down, moderate in the last couple of years. U.S. deficit, when you see it below the line, that's a surplus. These were unheard of, as everyone, I think, knew that was keeping up with things. This was the surplus that was realized during the Clinton administration, and now we have the substantial deficit that we've been realizing from 2002 to 2007. U.S. defense spending, this is an indication of the substantial increase in outlays for U.S. defense spending, and the challenge that it's not clear how we will bring this back, which will be discussed in subsequent classes. Mandatory outlays, this is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, have been on the rise.
Whether or not they are enough is the question which will also be discussed in years to come when put against demographic numbers, which I have not included in here. The federal funds effective rates, Kathy, you know about all this, and we're very well involved with this actually over time, but they going down. Remember, the issue has been how the Federal Reserve, through monetary policy, would in fact cause there to be cheaper dollars, more accessible dollars, increasing consumption, and therefore helping the economy to move along. So it was hoped. Then, interesting other statistics to look at. From 1950 to 2050, what becomes important to understand once you realize that we had a period of time between Clinton and Bush where we had the bubble. We had Clinton taking on, as is noted, the strategy of paying down debt, money becoming cheaper, consumption increasing, housing becoming more of a component of the per capita expenditure of individuals, but at the same time us consuming the savings that we had made through an increase in expenditures on the war. The question going forward, which I think the rest of these slides are important to note, and the reason I put them in here, is that people are saying, well, inflation is coming our way. The new president is going to have to deal with inflation. The new president is going to have to deal with the economy. And there is a sense that domestically, we can, in fact, by ourselves deal with that. And I think that what is being written these days now, it's important for this class to entertain, is that the BRIC countries, that is Brazil, India, China, and Russia, are growing at rates that are somewhere between, depending upon whether you believe the numbers or not, and there's a lot of controversy with that, somewhere between 8 and 12% by and between these very large gross domestic products. And therefore, the consumption profile that they have as relates to energy products, as relates to construction products, and relates to food, is just an overwhelming factor in terms of raising prices for us in the United States and everywhere else in the world. And the question of how we deal with that going forward is going to be substantial. One would suggest that in generations past there were statesmen, there were people who in fact would visit countries and talk to them about what is the problem of developing at 4% as opposed to 6 or 8%, when 4% is about double what the US is growing at. Why would anyone want to set the rest of the world into a state of inflation or hyperinflation just so certain countries can grow at these rates? Now, the battle that comes back to the new president is, well, we did it. You know, the United States grew at these rates. The United States grew at about 4.5% generally for the longest time. This hypergrowth becomes an ethical issue for the United States and an economic issue. An ethical, economic issue. They will want to grow, the other countries will want to grow, and there's a bunch of readings that will also be online about this. But it will have its consequences in terms of inflation, and it will affect, therefore, the way in which our internal economy works, the popularity of the next president, and the way in which foreign policy is going to have to be looked at. Let's just look at these numbers to see this. You can see here what I've done is I've taken these to show the growth, and then to show if this was 100% of the world, what it looks like. And you can see the substantial growth in population in India that's projected at this point in time, if there are no methods of birth control, if the birth rate continues on its current rate. China, in fact, you see declining rates and what someone would call control. Brazil stays pretty steady, and the United States shrinks a bit. But India is clearly going to have substantial population growth, therefore it's going to have substantial consumption, and therefore it's going to have a substantial economy that they're going to seek to grow. GDP growth, if you look at then this as just in terms of the BRIC countries being the important countries, you see the backing off of the United States in terms of GDP growth. You see Russia growing as a percent of where it was in year 2000 substantially. India continues rather
for its size, substantial growth. But China is really, kind of going gangbusters. Brazil, once again, is sort of a steady state, and a lot of people didn't expect to see that in the numbers. Consumer spending on food. Do the other rendition of it. The United States still will continue to be a substantial consumer of food resources. It is surprising to see that India, with the population growth that we saw, is not a greater consumer, is not a greater increase in food consumption. China also. It's sort of interesting that these figures do not reveal the expectation that there would be greater food consumption, i.e. relative to the United States. So things stay pretty steady here, but for a bit of a backing off the United States and a bit of growth in China. Oil consumption. What the forecast would indicate at this point in time, as you can see, is by 2030, the United States, pending any new policy, Mr. New President, whomever that may be, this is what it is expected that we will look like given current consumption profiles. The real, as is obvious, developer here is China, and it will continue to therefore push the cost of oil for as long as we stay hooked on oil substantially. And therefore we will have substantial price inflation on consumption, on the consumer consumption side also. I put in here kilometers of roadways, just really to give a picture. This is an idea, it's an attempt to get at a notion of, call it, modern urban civilization and cars and transportation and infrastructure. And you can see that with the population growth that we saw, that there is due to be some substantial growth. There will need to be substantial growth in all of these countries relative to infrastructure, which means construction materials will be consumed at rates that have never been consumed before, everything from concrete to steel and the like, which we have seen a bit of in terms of all of these commodities inflating in price, but probably substantially greater over the next 20 or 30 years. So the takeaway on this brief series of slides goes back to, as I said, as the new president comes in, it has been demonstrated by one president, Clinton, that if you took the strategy, and Bob Rubin is Secretary of the Treasury, that if you took the strategy of paying down debt, that in fact you would reduce interest expense, and you would therefore have more dollars available for both the mandatory and non-mandatory programs. In addition to that, there was a reduction that occurred, for better or for worse, by a percentage point, but the percentage point, remember, is trillions of dollars that we're talking about here, in the Defense Department budget. But what was happening at that time is that we had plenty of money if we needed to spend it, because we had dealt with the deficit. We were dealing with what was perceived to be the issues, are the real issues that demographically confront us in terms of the need for health care, education, and the like in the United States. We were attempting to moderate control on the defense side. And because we had basically cheap money that was coming through on the monetary side, there were dollars available to, in fact, invest in new product development, and therefore that new product development was being brought on by the stock market, the Clinton story. Now the question of what happened, as one would advise the new president, is would that have naturally continued if 9/11 didn't exist? Is there a difference between what Bush did and what Clinton did? The governor will sit here and say, "Are you kidding me, Bob?" But let me just go on here. 9/11 occurs, and all of a sudden the economy drops down. But you note from the slide, there was never a spring back. There was never anything that came back, but for the fact that we began to issue debt. We clearly took an incredible surplus position and turned it into a position of phenomenal debt consumption. Interest rates went up, The dollars available for mandatory and non-mandatory programs backed off, so therefore we came into the issue that we now have with Social Security and healthcare and the like, and the need to increase defense spending went up. But the result was that GDP, which was thought to have grown, gross domestic product, which was thought to have grown, might have been able to grow similar to what it did in the Clinton administration because taxes were held down, did not occur, as you see off of these slides. So we didn't get the same pop in the gross domestic product. And furthermore, we didn't get the same tax revenue coming in, clearly because taxes were reduced. So we have less GDP productivity, we have less tax revenue, and therefore we are in a position of real dollars where we have going forward less money, Mr. New President, to run the government at this point in time. What will that mean? The choices coming forward therefore say, somewhat we need a financing mechanism. What Wall Street at this point in time is saying, maybe what happens is that we, on a macro level, and I'll let the governor speak to the other issues of running the United States, but on a macro level, we will therefore be looking, as Wall Street currently is, for sources of capital to, in fact, underwrite institutions that are now having problems staying in place, keep going. And that will not, I think, not just include Wall Street, but it may be General Motors, it may be a bunch of other corporations who will need to be capitalized in ways which will necessarily bring a new meaning, Mr. President, to what it means to be global. Ownership will begin to change. Attitudes of boards on these corporations will begin to change. Employment policies will begin to change. Notions of generally accepted accounting principles and SEC requirements and foreign corrupt practices and things that nobody ever really thinks about, but are sort of the underpinning of making sure that the stock market works and therefore everybody's retirement account is there, may very well change. In addition to that, we are going to have to figure out, because while there has been more spending on the military, it is clear that, in fact, the assets within the Department of Defense, if you take the Air Force, and there are people from the Air Force sitting right here staring at me, and I appreciate their participation a lot, taking the Air Force, which has the greatest assets in the military, they're depreciated. Planes are like, too old to really to repair or to safely fly in many cases. Transport vehicles that go out of Otis that are, vintage 1967. So just to keep things going, there is this huge maintenance budget within the military, let alone do anything additional with it. Mr. President, that's going to have to be dealt with. In addition to that, issues relative to transportation, which the governor will talk about, are hugely underfunded, and that surplus that we had was enough to, in fact, set us up, Mr. President, for dealing with that over the last 8 years. Regardless of your politics, that could have done that in terms of, but it didn't. And so what we have done is we have delayed for 8 years substantial issues that have to do with the size of our population within the United States, the aging of the baby boomers within the United States, the aging of our infrastructure, and that money has gone into defense. So that's kind of where we are. Have a good day, Mr. President. And just after that briefing occurs, and then I'll hand it over to the governor, and those facts have been given to the president, then I suspect that there's another thing that the president has to deal with that stems from these slides. And I think probably the first phone call that the president gets, one of the first, is that the secretary comes in and says, Mr. President, Vladimir Putin's on the phone. Would you like to talk to him? And I believe Vladimir Putin ends up saying to the president, Mr. President, we'd like to tell you about the policies that the BRIC countries, that Russia and China and India and Brazil, have put in place as relates to the way in which we think we're going to deal with oil and gas and concrete and steel and food production around the United States. And I think at least one of the presidents would say, gee, I'd like to sit down and talk with you about that. That's clearly very, very important. And my concern is then that the issue is that very possibly the power politics of the world has changed such that Vladimir Putin says, well, Mr. President, I look forward to talking to you, but have a good day. We basically made up our minds to how these things are going to happen. And because of our debt situation, because of those who we have borrowed money from, we don't have a lot of leverage to say, well, wait a minute, Vladimir. No, I want to sit down and talk tomorrow. The question that we will wrestle with as the classes go on is there any leverage as relates to causing us to be effective in dealing with the distribution of scarce resources, buying between competing entities in a world of imperfect information, which is the definition of the market. If we can reestablish the global market, and I don't know if we can. Governor?